Hi, I'm Calvin Johns, and I own a small gaming company in Austin, Texas. Anthropos Games publishes tabletop role-playing games for folks who want a gritty, realistic world to play in and a creative, unique dice mechanic for deciding actions and what happens in the game. Our first title, Early Dark, was released earlier this year and has been doing well with fans. We have lots of players and are really excited about it. I started playing role-playing games at the age of 12 with my younger brother and a group of friends. I inherited a box of books from my cousin, and we didn't know anything about the genre, the subculture, or the stereotypes, but we found these exciting new worlds inside these books, in this box. Now, this was in Michigan, and we were outside playing baseball all day. We were jumping through the neighbors' cornfields and woods, and sometimes it gets cold, and so you'd come inside and have to find something to do. So we started playing role-playing games, and very soon we started writing our own. When you say role-playing game, most people think of one or two things. Either it's a small kid sitting in a room looking at the screen, playing a video game with elves and spells in it, or it's a group of kids putting on costumes and swinging foam swords out in the woods somewhere. Now, tabletop role-playing games are different from both of those other genres, although they're slightly related sometimes. Dungeons & Dragons was published in 1974 as an offshoot of miniature wargaming, and it kind of started this whole new wave of games. Now, almost 40 years later, there are thousands of tabletop role-playing games out and hundreds of different dice mechanics that those games use to tell stories and keep players involved and engaged. There are two central components to every role-playing game. One is the setting or the world of the game, which determines what kinds of heroes there will be and what kind of stories you will tell. And the other is the mechanic or numerical part of the game, which is the engine, the system. This is what dice you use when you roll and what those rolls will mean in determining the actions of the game. Now, when it comes to the world or the setting, many games are set in this familiar fantasy world with wizards, dragons, and elves. But role-playing games span many different genres of fiction, and you can have games that are taking place in a city with superheroes and supervillains, or that take place in a 1920s America as some film noir detective story, or games that take place in the contemporary world with vampires and werewolves hiding in the streets and lurking behind shadowy corners. With Early Dark, we tried to do something very different. So we pushed the time frame back over 1,000 years and made a semi-historical but fantastic game that is inspired by myths from all over the world. So instead of just having this European focus, we've tried to incorporate stories and kinds of heroes and tales from many different cultures and represent them in the game.
What I like about Early Dark is that it steps away from the traditional RPG platform of being the D&D traditional hack and slash Monty Hall system, and it turns it into a bit more of an avenue for storytelling.
I really like that it's more of a team effort, that we get to set up fights together and work together on what we're going to do to take down the orc or whatever creature.
One of the big hurdles of designing a role-playing game is coming up with a numerical system or engine that represents all kinds of conflict, combat, and decisions the heroes can make in the game with dice. Now, representing combat in a game is nothing new. Games like chess are all about mock combat, and each side plays an army and they march across a checkered board to hunt down each other's king. Many sports are related to combat or directly derived from combat, such as wrestling or martial arts. Now, in a tabletop role-playing game, you represent these things through a kind of numerical system with dice. Early Dark uses groups of 10-sided dice that the character rolls on his or her turn and then manipulates to decide what their hero might attempt to do. And at the end of a turn, depending on what those dice say, you've now figured out which actions succeed and which actions fail. Unlike video games that represent characters as pixels on a screen, or the live-action games where people dress up and interact as their characters, in a tabletop role-playing game, all of that work of keeping track of your hero and who he or she is gets done on paper, on the character sheet. Now, the character sheet will keep track of everything you need to know about that character to have them play inside the world of the game. This means you know how smart the character is, how strong the character is, how fast or how tricky. And a lot of these things are measured in numbers and a numerical system that then plays into the dice play and the dice engine of the game. You also keep track of everything that hero is carrying, whether it's fanciful weapons, large polished swords, small daggers or axes, what kind of armor they're wearing, and what kind of treasures they might be carrying in their pouches and backpacks. In addition to the character sheet, some players like to have something a little more concrete to hold on to about their character or their hero. And in this case, the traditional way to do that in tabletop role-playing is through a small metal miniature that the player picks out from the store, customizes a little bit, and then spends upwards of 20 or 30 hours painting. Now, because tabletop role-playing games derive directly from miniature war games, where entire armies were represented on fields and historical battles were played out, this idea of having a miniature that represents your hero or your team is like a large part of the genre.
My character is Baron. I use mainly hacking blades, which are like axes or maces, and I do that to wear down the fatigue of the monster or NPC character that I'm trying to kill.
A night of role-playing is much like a poker night. You get a group of friends to sit around a table and you engage in a game that's all about strategy, skill, and chance. Now, in a tabletop role-playing game, just like in poker, you want to get on the same page as other players, you want to know just what to do to maximize and manipulate risk, and then in the end, it kind of falls down to chance whether you win or not. It's a time to flaunt your bravado, it's a time to be creative, and it's a time to earn bragging rights with your friends by being bold and being smart in terms of the game. My name's Calvin Johns. I'm a graduate student, frisbee golf enthusiast, amateur dancer, and in my spare time I write role-playing games. Well, hopefully one of those other hobbies pans out.